Hello, this is Joshua for Frost Dragon Designs, and today I'd like to talk to you about my D20 Rat hard enamel pin. This pin joins my D20 animal collection, which includes a raccoon, an opossum, a raven, a bumblebee, a ferret, and now a rat. Technically there's one other. When I did my Series 3 Kickstarter for my RPG cats, I had a bone dragon, and if you look at this pin design, you can see all the elements that I include in the D20 animals. It's got the same ground shape, it's got a D20, although he's moved it out of center, and if you look in the ground there, in that pile that he's standing on, you will see a knocked over triangle. So having said that, the rat is the 6th, or possibly 7th, depending on how you look at it, pin in this collection. So let's get into the design. You can see I started off this D20 pin just like I did the other D20 pins, in that I have the same triangle in the background, a D20, and the ground. When I started working on this pin design, I had some sketches, and what I ended up doing was going to YouTube and looking up videos of rats playing, people's pet rats, and I just kind of watched them for 45 minutes, maybe an hour. I'd pause it every now and then and do quick sketches of whatever the rat was doing on the screen, just to get an understanding of the general body shape and how that worked for them. The heads, I simplified that down to kind of a wedge type shape. That's pretty common for rodent illustrations. Then I have on the body, I have two main portions. One, the smaller one being up by the shoulders. It's kind of one bulbous area. And then the hind quarter, the back legs, is the second major portion of the body. And it's much larger and a little more bulbous, because that's kind of how their legs seem to be from most of the pauses and quick sketches that I did. Rats also have a long naked tail, hairless tail, so that was a big important element for the design as well. You can see my first thought, and in my sketches I had the tail draping across the front of the pin design. I did this so that there would be some additional support for it, so it wouldn't be a long skinny piece coming off of the pin design, but something didn't feel right about it. So I experimented a little bit. You can see here with the tail coming up the side. Now, I like it aesthetically. It looks good, but my concern is that's a pretty thin piece to just be dangling off the side of the pin. So I think you'll see in this video I come back to trying to have it across the bottom a couple times, or at least one more time. But honestly, the tail curving up the side like that ends up looking really nice. So it's interesting. Sometimes I'll get stuck on an idea, like in the sketch it goes across the bottom. And so I'll keep trying that and keep trying that, even though I'd already found another solution that worked very well. It's interesting just how sometimes we get fixated on, but this wasn't the original concept. So I find that kind of thing a little interesting. But the actual design and placement of the rat itself went pretty well. This was the first time I've done a rat pin design. So there's a bit of a learning curve for me, but overall, I like how quickly he came together. I think what really helped were those sketches when I was pausing and looking at YouTube videos of people's pet rats playing. So you can see now something fun that I did with this one. Instead of having the D20 be just a color, I am making it a cheese D20, maybe a cheese 20. I did this because, I thought it was a cute idea. And in cartoons and things, we see rats and mice often associated with cheese. Now, what I've learned after the fact, after I, already went ahead and had this pin produced, rats don't really like cheese. I mean, it's not that they dislike cheese, but it's just a food to them, like any other food. Now, if you really wanted to give a rat a treat, several people I read online, it seems like rats really enjoy hard-boiled eggs as a treat. I don't know how I would have incorporated that idea. People who actually keep pet rats probably would be like, hey, yeah, no, that makes sense. But, the common person who just thinks rats are cute, maybe has never owned one, I don't know that trying to make it like a hard-boiled egg D20 really would have been the best idea. I mean, that sort of thing happens a lot with my pin designs, because there's the difference between the common expectation and then the expert's knowledge. And you have to make decisions about that. I'm not an expert in many things. So, I have to rely on what my research tells me with things like that. And, even if I had figured out early on that, rats and mice, they'll eat cheese, but it's not like a special treat to them or anything, I probably still would have gone with the cheese 20 just because I think it looks cool. So you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm working on a teacup. The idea for that is I still wanted this to be a trash rules pin. So there had to be some amount of junk or garbage. But, I like the idea of this being an elevated garbage. It's not just trash that he's around. It's maybe it's like tea with a rat. Like that was the idea, was like it may be a broken teacup, but it's still a teacup, and so maybe he's about to have his own rat version of high tea with his broken cup and his cheese. He's got his little treat for his tea, and I thought that was a cute idea. So you can see I'm using a lot of curves to make this teacup. It started out with an oval, and I cut parts of that away, and now I'm doing some freehand lines to get the thickness to show there. It's not based on any real teacup that I have or anything, but I just thought it was an interesting idea to have, a thicker rim at the top of the cup. I guess it's kind of a combination between a teacup and like a coffee cup kind of thing there. The actual creation of the teacup went pretty quickly, pretty smoothly. I mean, it's basically some cylinders with some curves on it. What I think I started to struggle with was figuring out the placement of it. A lot of times I'll have these ideas, and in my sketches, it's just a quick little, maybe a cylinder shape with like another little loop to indicate that there's a handle. So I don't really fully work things out in the sketches. And then when I get in to do these things digitally, sometimes I'm like, oh, well, that was a fun idea, but how do I actually make that work? The rat's tail was a good example. In my sketch, like I said, the tail draped across the front of the pin design, but it just, every time I tried to do that in, the digital version, I just did not like the way it looked. You can see here what I'm doing is I'm now having that tail, when it curves up, I have it touching the back again. So there's now 2 contact points. So it's no longer an issue of me being concerned about the sturdiness of the tail on the final pin design. So that was a good solution that I had there. That red X that's in that little loop area, if you've watched any of my other videos, you might know already, that little red X symbolizes that is a cutout. That's going to be a part that is basically a hole through the pin, all the way through, that you could look through, light comes through it. And the idea of marking it with an X is just to make sure that my production partner knows this is a cutout, not white enamel. Because without that little X, they could very easily think that shape in between the tail and the body was supposed to be filled with white enamel, because it looks just like the white of the rat itself. So here I'm working on the teacup more. It looks like I had finally gotten a nice placement for the teacup, and I like the way that looked. And, I'm now doing another little shard. This is maybe a broken piece of the teacup that has come off. And I think this is looking pretty good so far. What I don't like, just looking at it now as I'm talking, I don't like the tiny blue triangle that's created in between the cheese and the cup. So I'm pretty sure I resolved that, because the smaller spaces like that, they can cause some problems. But here I'm adding in a spoon. It's a cute little spoon. I wanted to have something else across the bottom because, like I keep saying, I originally had the tail draping across the bottom of the design. And even though I felt like the tail worked better going up the side of the design, I really still wanted something across the bottom as just a design element. So that spoon worked really well there. And, something else I'm looking at as I'm talking here and doing this video, I really like how the tail curve out is balanced by the curve out of the teacup's handle. I think that works really well. They're both curves, but it's bigger at the bottom on the rat's tail and comes back in closer at the top, whereas the teacup handle is bigger at the top and it curves back in toward the bottom. So here's something else that I'm doing. I'm trying to add some details to the side of the teacup. And I stole that rose from one of my early pin designs. It was a fairy with a big rose in the background. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to come up with a way to make it a fancier, like a teacup. Like the kind that, have floral designs painted on the side of them. And, that didn't really work because this isn't really like a formal teacup. As I kind of mentioned before, it's kind of like a hybrid of a coffee mug and a teacup. So I understand why I was trying to get, a flower pattern to work on there. But, that was just too many details. It didn't really work for the concept that I was going for here. Ultimately, I removed that part. But, this came together really quickly, really well. I think that's because, the teacup itself, nothing terribly difficult there. The D20, I've that was already there. I just added some holes for the cheese. The rat would have been the most difficult part of this, but I spent time ahead of this, doing the little sketches, pausing YouTube videos and looking at people's pet rats as they ran around their apartments or whatnot, and getting an understanding for the shapes that were involved there. And I think that really aided me in being able to get this done quickly and having it look as good as it does. I'm really happy with how this pin design looks, and I hope you are too. Let me know in the comments below what other animals you want to see join the D20 animal collection. I was thinking maybe a pig or a skunk or an octopus, maybe to replace my older D20 octopus pin design, but I'd love to hear what you think would be a great addition to this collection. If you enjoyed watching this, please go ahead and like and subscribe. I'm planning on doing a video each time I release a new pin, so hopefully you enjoyed this, and hopefully you'll be back to see another one. Thank you so much, and have a great day.